Welcome to Dynasty Life. I'm Theo Gremminger. Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. I had this guest, Cody Carpentier, on in January. We crushed it so hard that I have to have Cody back just 2 months, a little less than 2 months later. Post NFL Combine winners and losers. Cody Carpentier of RosterWatch here to help us break it down. Cody, you had boots on the ground in Indianapolis the entire time. I mean, start to finish. You don't take any time off, man. You're constantly ripping out tweets. You're dropping articles, already recording. Like, how was your overall experience, man?
It's good. Another year in the bag. I think Alex Dunlap from RosterWatch, I think it was his 13th year out of 14. The only year he hadn't went was the COVID year when nobody could go. That was my fourth consecutive. Gets better every time. It's seemingly like the weeks go by, obviously faster every time you go through it. But man, it really, you go into those weeks, man. I'll just put it short this way. You know, the Senior Bowl week, the Shrine Bowl week, when you start with the Shrine Bowl on like a Friday and you don't get home until Thursday from the Senior Bowl, it's a long week. But the Combine week, for some reason, it just takes so much out of you because you're at the same place for 6 days, 6 nights, whatever it is, and you're walking 2-3 miles a day on cold pavement, and it's a good time. You eat good, eat once a day, it feels like, drink a lot of bit, and have a good time, talk to these prospects, talk to these head coaches, GMs, evaluating, and getting in front of all 26 of them. So it was a great time in Indianapolis once again. Hopefully they keep it there.
Yeah, and big shout out to all that you do, Cody, because let's go over that little schedule here. Cody goes Shrine Bowl into the Senior Bowl. They pretty much merge into one another at this point on the calendar. So Cody does the entire Shrine Bowl, does the entire Senior Bowl. You're talking about Texas. You're talking about Alabama. Then you're talking about having a little time off, constantly running through about the classes, doing your mock drafts. Then you hit the Combine. Now we've got about 6 weeks until the actual NFL draft. So you're also, correct me if I'm wrong, will attend some pro days.
So far, I think I'm going to be at Georgia, Clemson, South Carolina, working on Miami. Go down there and see Cam, working on that one. I got to hit them back, actually. That's a good reminder. But those are the 4, and then hopefully I'll try and get to either Bama or Ole Miss to see the Milroe or Dart one as well.
Yeah, and Cody, you're not to make this a Cody Carpentier show because we're talking about the Combine, but like Cody's a must follow. He's also a must follow for NFL draft content. So fantasy, NFL draft, just like everything draft related, Cody's definitely one of the best people to follow. So we're really happy to be able to talk shop today on Monday morning, just a few hours after the Combine ended. Let's talk about a couple of noteworthy players, not necessarily winners and losers. I mean, we could say this guy's a winner, but he was already probably a first-round pick, and that's your wide receiver 1 in this class, Luther Burden. Cody, surprising thing for me, Luther Burden is 6 feet tall. I heard all these people saying he's going to be 5'9", 5'10". He is 6 feet tall. Then Luther Burden goes out and runs a very strong 40-yard dash, 4.41, 4.42, right in that range. Talk to me about Luther Burden. You already were into him. What do these athletic testing numbers sort of do for him?
What do they do for him? I think just justify where he's at. The thing about Luther Burden that I was, I guess, most excited about was kind of exactly what you just said. When I saw those measurements come in and it read 6 foot even, I go, whoa, okay. I was expecting sort of feel like a 5'10" and 3/4, 5'10", 6, whatever it was going to be, maybe a 194. Instead, we get a 206. Like, this is, when I talk about the archetype, like, this is the definition of the archetype. In this class, guys that kind of fit in this range where, they're 5'11", 6 foot, and they are 200 pounds. That's your Burdens. That's your Emeka Egbukas, your Jalen Royals. Alec Ayomanor to a certain extent, he's a little bit taller, but historically, that's been the kind of the trajectory or the place I want to be for fantasy football receivers that bring a dynamism to the table, whether it's a Malik Neighbors, a Diggs, OBJ, things of this nature. And he filled in exactly where I want him to be. The one problem I had was the hands. His hands came in, and this might sound stupid, his hands came in at 8.5 inches, right? And people are like, well, what's that mean? Well, what it means is, like, when you look like a Emeka Egbuka, his hands were a little over 9.5 inches. Tet McMillan's was 10. Matthew Golden's was 9.5. That range is much more where you want to be. You remember like Anthony Miller from close to a decade ago coming out of Memphis. What made Anthony Miller such a not really what made him a great prospect? He was a guy that fit the archetype as well. He was a miss, a guy that's still bouncing around. I think he's on like, fifth, 16 by now, but he caught some passes this last year, right? He had 10-inch mitts at 5'11", 205 pounds, strong hands, could work all over. I thought Anthony Miller was a sure thing. The one thing I have wrong with the Burden profile is the hands. That 8.5-inch hands. It kind of, you look at this past year, people are like, well, what happened in 2024? You turn the 2023 tape on, you go, well, that's receiver one. Correct. You turn the 2024 tape on, you go, well, what happened a little bit? You lost some of that luster. It's like, well, first off, Brady Cook sucks. And secondly, boom, like the hands are smaller. And if you look at the heat charts, Ray G has a good, he's got access to the Huddle IQ heat charts. And the heat charts show you the targets have not always been on target with Luther Burden. So if they're not on target, you're having to extend, you get this catch radius out here. And if you got smaller hands and you're not as strong of hands, like you got a Matthew Golden who's got really strong freaking hands, not going to drop a lot of footballs. You got small hands and not strong hands, you're going to drop more footballs, right? So I guess that's the one worry I have with Burden. But right now I'm keeping him as my wide receiver one in fantasy.
Yeah, and I think that, you bring up some interesting points about hand size, and certain teams are going to value that more. I think that that's like a team specific in their evaluative process. You bring up catch radius. Yeah, it matters. But quality of target matters a lot for these guys. And if Burden lands in a lot of the situations he's projected to, Houston with CJ Stroud, Washington with Jaden Daniels, we're not going to worry so much about him getting hospital balls out there. And the hand size thing, like, this is not just a Cody thing. Like, we remember last year, one of the traits that people loved about Michael Penix was he had the biggest hands ever for a quarterback. Like, NFL people love this sort of thing. It's gripping the football, potential in cold weather. Like, you can come up with a bunch of things here. But yeah, I mean, again, I'll take the 4'4", 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds, with the slightly smaller hands over a 5'10", 198, with a 4'9". You know what I mean? So we'll look at it as a glass half full type week for Luther Burden. And the DJ Moore comp, the athletic DJ Moore comp, DJ Moore, 6 feet, 210 pounds, very similar size to Luther Burden. Another player just to get your 2 cents on, because this is one where it's a little bit punitive, but Kaleb Johnson is kind of a loser, but it doesn't make our losers list. But he's like, in the grand scheme of things, my take is the people that had Kaleb ahead of Omarion Hampton, that ship sails, because Omarion Hampton's going to be a first-round pick. Kaleb Johnson will probably be in that 45 through 60 range, which is still very good for a running back. But a 4.57 guy in a draft class with guys like Hampton, guys like Judkins, who, spoiler alert, make our winners. Your quick thoughts on, does this do anything for you, Cody, with Kaleb Johnson, knowing that he's a little bit closer to a 4.6 than he is a 4.4, like some people were maybe guessing?
The 4.57 is fine.
Fine.
Ollie Gordon ran a 4.61, very similar build, 6.01.0 for Kaleb, which is 6'1", 6.01 and 3/8 for Ollie Gordon, 2 pounds apart, 224 pounds, 226 pounds. The length's close to the same. Ollie's a little bit longer in wingspan, and Gordon runs a 4.61, Kaleb runs a 4.57. I think both are fine. Kaleb, I guess, is obviously viewed a little bit higher in the grand scheme of the sport right now, coming off that big season at Iowa. I'm not worried about Kaleb. I think there's going to be, I think the first thing I did when I looked over at Alex, we're sitting there watching the times come through, and I'm like, well, there's going to be a little bit of value created in this Kaleb thing, because I think guys like RJ Harvey are going to get drafted near him, which is going to allow people to push him up, which I think is a great call. I think Harvey's a great back. I mean, we talk about quads, brother. Like,
keep a little gas in the tank on Harvey.
Harvey's godly, son. But I think there's some other people in here too that, there's so many running backs in this class, it doesn't really matter. When you get to your drafts, I do think that there's a possibility that pending landing spot, Kaleb could drop a few spots, behind a Harvey, behind a Gordon, potentially behind like an ETN in your rookie drafts. potentially, depending on landing spot, because of the slower fat. But again, sub 4.6, I'm fine with it.
I think my takeaway with him is, if the athletic testing numbers are a little bit more in line with what we saw from Judkins and Hampton at like 224 pounds with that sort of production this year, I think Kaleb would have been more likely to get into that top 45. When you start saying 45 through 60, people say, what's the difference, Theo? Like, really, what's the difference? The difference is you could end up be more likely to be Zach Charbonnet your rookie year, where your team will say, he's a really good value here. I'm going to put him as my backup, or I'm going to put him as a committee back. Let's say you're Houston at the end of the second round, or Baltimore end of the second round. I can take that guy as sort of an heir apparent back, and it doesn't matter to me at all if he doesn't start, because I have a Super Bowl contender, and I'm going to have Kaleb Johnson backing up Joe Mixon or Derrick Henry. Now, for us in Dynasty, if we're patient, that's fine. But little things like that can happen when in this draft class. Now, if Kaleb Johnson was in last year's draft class, it would be way, way less concerning because he probably still would have checked off right behind Jonathan Brooks. But the 4.57, we don't want to be punitive, but it's a little bit more of a David Montgomery path for Kaleb Johnson than him hitting at something like remarkably high. That's sort of, so not a loser, technically not on our loser list, but definitely somebody that we want to be talking about. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about Omarion Hampton and his incredible combine performance.
I am proud to announce that Fast Draft now has an all-defense game called D-Up. That's right, fans of IDP finally have a real money best ball game that they can play. No more manually setting up leagues every time you want to do a draft. No. Now you can play for 10 grand, 2,000 to first. Could draft up to 30 teams, all defense. And the best part, balanced scoring, tackles for loss, pass breakups. It all factors in. Just draft 6 defensive players, top 4 into your lineup every week. It's that easy. It's so easy that this isn't just for IDP people. If you love the NFL, then you'll love this game. And for the first time with Fast Draft, you can sweat both sides of the ball on Sunday. So use your host's promo code to get a $25 deposit match, and you'll love this D-Up contest because it's about time we got one.
Welcome back to Dynasty Life. Theo Gremminger with Cody Carpentier. We're talking about NFL Combine winners and losers for fantasy football. And Cody, we've got to talk about Omarion Hampton heading into the Combine, my RB2. Wow, I didn't know Omarion Hampton was gonna have this sort of a 40 though. Like we thought fast, but 4.43 over 110 on a speed score, and he's absolutely rocked up human. Like looks the part, looks like he's 230. Doesn't look like, he carries it very, very well.
The RB2. There is no conversation for RB2. I know there's a lot of people out there that are having the conversation, but it's moot. It's a moot point. If you saw this guy in human, and if you saw this guy in flesh, I should say, it's one of the rare guys, Theo, that when you go to an event and you see him, you saw it with Ollie Gordon. You're like, man, this guy looks like a tight end. I'll tell you, when you walk up on Ollie Gordon or on Omarion Hampton, sorry, word fumbling right now. If you walk up on Omarion Hampton, it don't take you but 3 seconds to realize that thing's different. And like we talk about with Genty, everybody knows his game is different. He don't look that different from a physically overpowering standpoint. You look at Omarion Hampton, and it's as impressive a build as I've seen maybe since Saquon, as far as like his traps. When you wear a non-skin tight, those workout shirts, it's not the skin tight one. It's the one that's breathable, right? When you got a breathable shirt on and you can see a dude's traps popping out through the front, and then when he starts walking that way, you can see like real traps popping out the shirt. And the definition of it, you're like, I got it. And the neck and the head, the bulldog head, and the overall build, you're like, that's my running back right there. And people will question his vision. I've seen that. People are questioning, his elusivity. He's just a straight line guy. He's going to get the ball. Guess what? It works. He can get the ball and run straight. Doesn't matter. He's going to go through you. We're trying to figure out who a comp was. Alex is like, I think maybe Jonathan Taylor. He's like, I think, I don't want to say it, but like there's a little bit of like a Latavius Murray vibe to it. I'm thinking like, does it matter?
Here you go.
Deuce McAllister, like there's a lot there with these bulldog built running backs. I mean, I was impressed.
I like the Jonathan Taylor one. Let's say Nick Chubb with better receiving ability. How about that?
I like it.
I mean, I'm not running with it. We're not putting this on a t-shirt.
No, I don't put that one on a t-shirt. I like it,
we're not.
though.
Next, Jonathan Taylor gets the people going. But bottom line is, like, Omarion Hampton also has the receiving prowess in multiple college seasons, where it's less of a projection. Like we talk about, like Kaleb, like we project he can be a dump down guy. Like Omarion Hampton, you can do things in the passing game with. Omarion Hampton, who you don't have to have an exact NFL comp, but guys that are 110 plus speed score and get drafted inside the top 40 picks have a huge hit rate. Omarion Hampton's going to be a very, very strong dynasty asset. I think he's immediately a top 10 running back in dynasty right out the gate. And I think he's a guy that in redraft, if he gets that sort of draft capital, he's a 3rd round pick this year in redraft. So Omarion Hampton, massive winner. My RB6 in this class, RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey, awesome combine, had a really good Senior Bowl. And Cody, we don't want to move guys up because of the speed, but RJ Harvey was a guy that we wanted to see run fast because the on-field production was excellent. Back-to-back seasons at Central Florida with big-time running production and also a ton of touchdown scores. Enough as a receiver, had over 6 yards a carry every year as a collegiate. RJ Harvey now backs it up with strong testing numbers. A day 2 pick, but is he going to sneak in the 2nd round?
100%. I think that 100%. I mean, the big hubbub is that going into the Senior Bowl was that he was going to be the first, the second senior taken, the first senior after Travion Henderson at the running back position. And right now, there's conversation of first off, a ton of running backs scoring in the first 2 days, like a dozen in the first 2 days, which is going to make fantasy gamers.
I love it.
I mean, creme de la creme in the Krispy Kreme, right? Like that's what that is. And as far as like Harvey, where he fits in there, it's right around that 5, 6, 7 range as far as where he'll come off the board. I think you obviously have your top guy. We talked about Omarion, we talked about Kaleb. When you look at the top right there, I think those top 4, I think also Kaleb would all be RB1 in last year's class. If you just picked up last year's class and put it in this year's class, or you just put them together in all the situations were situational, which is Jonathan Brooks dealing with his knee injury. All 5 of those guys, Genty, Hampton, Henderson, Judkins, Johnson, are all RB1s in one-offs in those. Does that make sense? In that class, they're all one-off RB1s. Harvey's right on the cheeks. He's right on the cheeks of Jonathan Brooks right there. And you know what? I think if you're in 2024 and you got Brooks, no testing, coming off that 1 year at Texas, and you got Harvey coming off of what he's done, weighing in at 205 pounds, which is a little bit heavier than we thought, 5'8.5". He's right at that Trey Mason-Dixon literal build, and he runs a 4 flat, and he's got them quads. This guy's going to break a lot of tackles to the next level. He is built. You talk about muscle hamster. You talk about Saquon. You want to talk about these dudes' legs. You want to talk about A.J. Dillon's legs. You want to talk about Mike Davis's legs. These are the best quads I have ever seen on a running back in football, ever. I'm not even, this ain't even a joke. These are the best quads in the sport. This guy needs to be on a stage in April. Flexing.
Shout out to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Shout out to Arnold. Let's get him at the Arnold Expo. Let's do it. But yeah, in all seriousness, no, RJ Harvey is awesome. Cody's got him somewhere in the RB5 through 7 range. I have him RB6, and that's a really, really strong take for this draft class. Like RJ Harvey also has two-way ability, good receiver on top of that profile. So yeah, that was one definitely. I was very happy to see a 4.4 next to his name. We don't want to double count athleticism. We knew Bhayshul Tuten from Virginia Tech was going to be athletic, but Cody, we didn't necessarily think he was going to rip this thing to shreds and be a top 10 speed score guy all time. Your thoughts on Bhayshul Tuten? Also a guy that I think we can comfortably project probably rose 2 rounds with the way the NFL is valuing big play ability, home run hitting ability, and athleticism. I think he is a day 2 guy now. Before the combine, probably would have been a round 4, round 5 guy. Productive at Virginia Tech. Also a guy who transferred up from North Carolina A&T. You like seeing that?
Yeah, shout out Tariq Cohen. The thing is that I don't think there's a double count here because, yeah, we knew he was going to be explosive. We knew he was going to be fast, but we didn't know he was going to be this fast. Like the rumors that we got were like 4.38. There's a big difference between 4.38 and 4.32. Like you're knocking on the door of the 4.2s. And at the running back position, over 200 pounds, that is ridiculously impressive. Like you got to remember these last couple of years. Yes, we've had, the Breece Hall, the Ken Walker, the Jonathan Taylor, these guys 4.39 and they're 217 pounds or whatever. This is impressive. And he had the jumps to boot, almost 11-foot broad jump, 41-inch vertical almost. The shuttle, not quite the best, 4.41. I would have liked to seen that thing probably closer to like 4.1 or, that's somewhere in that range. But Tuten has showed at Virginia Tech. I remember vividly this one play against Miami, I think it was, or maybe it was Duke, whatever. I remember the play, though, and it was like gone. And when you can see it translate to the sport, I don't know if we'll talk about Matthew Golden or not, but the thing about Matthew Golden running that 4.29, which just as we're here talking about it, is the fastest 40 all time since 2003 by a wide receiver more than 190 pounds. Broke the Darius Hayward Bay record, which was 4.3 flat. He runs 4.29 over 190 pounds. Anyway, back to Bhayshul Tuten. The reason I brought up Matthew Golden is because Matthew Golden's 4.29 doesn't show up on tape. Bhayshul Tuten's 4.32 shows up on tape. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, I think Chris Trapasso, our guy from CBS, he put out a mock 2 weeks ago before the combine. And he's like, yo, put him into the Chargers in round 1. And we're like, Chris, the hell you doing? And now I think it was more of like that thing. Like he was just trying to put it in the back of your mind. I did the same thing with Nickem and Worry, the safety from South Carolina. I put him into round 1, and now it's actually a conversation. But Bhayshul, I think Tuten is a guy that you talked about. I think he gets up into day 2, and depending on how this run is deployed, I think that's the biggest thing we need to keep an eye on is depending on how this running back run is deployed. I think we're going to see 2 backs off in round 1 at least. If you get a third, you're going to be ecstatic. We're going to get 2. And when that third one hits, you may see 3, 4, 5, 6 go off the board. And if 3, 4, 5, 6 go off the board before pick 50 or 55, then that next load of guys, whether it's your Tuten, your Sampson, Harvey could potentially be in there if Harvey's not the 6th. You got Brashard Smith, you got Etienne, Scadaboo, all these different guys, Bhayshul Tuten included, that thing could happen before, you could have another run before I would expect before the top 100 ends. Yeah. And that's massive. You can get again, what we've heard is like potentially a dozen guys in the first 2 days, which is just ridiculous. And he could be somewhere in the, halfway point of that.
So quickly, just to rip through and finish out running backs, Brashard Smith, 4.39 40, great production this year, great Senior Bowl. We're projecting him now as probably I was going to say end of the 3rd round. You think he could go even a little higher than that?
Yeah, he could be a part of that run. I think he's a part of that next run. So end of the 3rd round, I think is proper. Again, the end of the 3rd round, I think is pick 101. So it's literally the top 100. I think there's a chance you get him back in there. 194 pounds is big. His BMI is going to come in strong. He's got good length. Former wide receiver, good hands, runs a 4.39, which if he was a receiver, you'd be ecstatic about. I think you're equally as ecstatic as a running back here. He's got some growing to do. We've seen Antonio Gibson, who was formerly a wide receiver, transition to the running back position. I think he went off the board at like 66th overall in the middle of his transition to running back and / receiver. So I think that's probably the range you're looking at for Brashard. I think he does make it into round 3, though.
Yeah, it's a nice run here. Gibson, Tracy, Brashard Smith. And Brashard Smith's season this year at SMU was really, really good. And you talk about speed that translates. Like, he hit over 22 miles per hour this year for SMU in a game. So this is translatable speed. Let's talk about really probably the biggest winner, a running back that maybe sort of solidified himself. This is big for fantasy because I think Quinshon Judkins, you talk about the big 5 running backs. There's a lot more Quinshon Judkins RB3 rankers today than there were on Friday. And Judkins, I think when you talk about NFL draft capital, top 40 pick. top 45. Like, I think Judkins is going to get really good NFL draft capital. He tested through the roof. Remember after the college football playoffs where people were questioning the speed? It was like a 3-day period where all of a sudden Quinshon Judkins is not explosive enough despite his incredible college production and the guy ripping off all these long runs as a collegiate. There was like that little segment where like, yeah, he doesn't have the explosive long speed. He's going to be like a 4.6 guy. These guys are in shambles right now, Cody.
You know what pisses me off, I think, the most, Theo, is I can't remember the last time when we did the show. And it might have been 2 times ago. I don't know. We do so many shows, it feels like, together. But the last time or the second to last time, we talked about Judkins. And I'm going to leave this with one thought and one thought only, because I am mad at myself. I'm mad at myself for reading the comments because I said that I thought Quinshon Judkins deserved to be in the conversation with Genty. And the chat and the comments after that video ate me. They're like, what are you talking about? What is that? That's not even close. Blah, 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 blah. And of course, I love Hampton. I love Henderson. But here's the thing, man. I don't care. I'm not going to make Judkins my RB2. But what I'm going to say is I don't care about these top 4 guys. I love them all. Is that Judkins is literally my comp for him is Alvin Kamara. And I have the most conviction in that maybe of any comp in the class. Because the contact balance I love with Judkins. He doesn't have the breakaway speed. Kamara he was 214 pounds. He ran like a 4.55, 4.56. You look at this guy who just came in here and had one of the most prolific combines we've ever seen. 11-foot broad jump led the class. 38.5-inch vertical. 4.48 at 221 pounds. I'm done with it. Oh, he can't do this. He can't do that. I don't care what he can't do. I'll tell you what he can do is he can have 1,000 yards in 3 seasons. He can do it in the SEC. He can do it in the Big Ten. He can break tackles. He can break away. He can do a lot. Just because Trayvon Henderson is better pass pro, is better at catching the football in the backfield, and has long speed, doesn't mean Quinshon Judkins can't be good and can't be great. And just like that 2017 class when Alvin Kamara went at the 201 as consensus in rookie drafts. I'm not going to cuss, but I'm just going to say F around and find out.
Yeah, Quinshon Judkins is the ultimate prospect fatigue guy where he's been doing it for so long. This guy's been a Sunday player for 3 years in college. Now he has these sort of athletic measurables. Don't get it twisted. You say 201, Judkins will be gone before that. Because I think when he gets that top 40, top 45 cap, I think people are going to look at him. And Cody, he has, like you said, 2-way ability and the potential to be a 3-down back in the league and the potential to handle volume in the league. Like, he checks off a ton of boxes. My RB3, Quinshon Judkins. Let's talk about the wide receivers. I already talked about Matthew Golden. Wait,
so you have him ahead of Henderson?
Right now, I think Henderson and him are really, honestly,
same.
Last time I've listed them slash. I did this on another show before, and I've had them side by side. But I think at the end of the day, Henderson, here's the caveat. Henderson, I think, has a better chance of sneaking in the first round still because people are chasing that Jahmyr Gibbs outcome. And Judkins, I think, is more likely an early second rounder. Again, that's pulling teeth. I think they're both top 4 for me with Kaleb at 5, Omarion at 2. And it's okay, people, that you like multiple backs in this top 5. And it's okay if you have exposure to multiple ones on your dynasty rosters because they're all really, really good without trying to argue over some 3 versus 4 thing. So let's talk about the wide receivers. We talked about Matthew Golden. We'll get him out of the way. We don't even need to go over him. We loved Matthew Golden when he was 4.48, 4.45, and then he runs a 4.29. It also takes his draft capital from somewhere in that. The two of us over at Fantasy Points, Cody and I went on with Brett Whitefield at Fantasy Points, and we did a real-life NFL mock draft, and we had Matthew Golden inside of the first round way before the combine, but the 4.29 makes him go from maybe the 21 through 30 range into a guy who could get drafted 12. He could be the first wide receiver off the board. So it sort of changes things. Obviously a winner, but let's talk about your guy. This is a little bit of a sleeper. This is the first time anybody's talked about a Colorado Buffalo, besides Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter on my pods throughout the entire draft process, Jimmy Horn went out and had himself a combine. Former South Florida player, transfers to Colorado. You graded him very, very highly.
Jimmy Horn's an interesting player. Jimmy Horn Jr., one of 4 wide receivers at Colorado there in this draft cycle. Only 3 went to the combine. LeJontay Wester, formerly of Florida International. Jimmy Horn, formerly of South Florida. Yeah, Will Shepard, who did not go to the combine. Unfortunately, he's a big body guy who was the Shrine Bowl. And then, of course, you have Travis Hunter there. Jimmy Horn's a really good receiver. Here's the thing. We grade out each and every one of these prospects at the NFL Combine. Me and Alex are in the building, not only there to do the 40 stuff, but also there to grade each and every one of the routes, each and every single one of the routes. And the finishing grades we ended up with this year, so we've done this the last 3 years, we started doing it, was Jimmy Horn Jr., 25.5 points, Jack Bech, 25.5 points. These guys are both up there in Tier 1. Tier 1 for the last 3 years, this is out of 111 overall players. Tier 1 is 25 points and above. So people are going to hate this, but Charlie Jones, obviously from Purdue, he was number 1 overall all time. Tank Dell, Josh Downs, Puka Nacua, Roma Dunze, Zay Flowers, Quinshon Judkins, Jimmy Horn, Jack Bech, Luther Burden. That's your top 10 all time. It's a pretty good group.
That's a really nice hit. That's a nice hit list for you and Alex. The Charlie Jones at the top was exceptionally fast. It still had NFL draft capital. But
they still like him. They still like him too. I don't want to interrupt you, but we were talking today, or not today, but we were talking last Monday to, gosh, it was already a week ago, to Ortiz, the general manager of the Cincinnati Bengals. And I was asking about, like, outside of Higgins and Chase, can you talk a little bit about like Yosevich and the rest of that room? And he loved Yosevich, and he goes, you know what, Charlie's been dealing with injuries, but we love where Charlie's at as his punt returning role and as well as a complimentary wide receiver 3 and 4 in this offense. Like, they love Charlie Jones. Now, the grade's super high because the guy was, he had 1,300 yards at Purdue, and he went out there and ran literally the best gauntlet we've ever graded. And the gauntlet's very heavily in the scoring system here. So that goes into it. But Charlie Jones, people call that a miss, but Charlie Jones is still nice.
Charlie Jones is still there, guys. You can't take L's until the guy retires, Cody. Let's go with a big winner combine, Jaylin Noel. Jaylin Noel, we were at the Senior Bowl, Cody. Jaylin Noel was ripping it up for the entire Senior Bowl. One of the best players at the Senior Bowl on the offensive side of the ball. Big time production at Iowa State, over 80 catches, over 1,100 yards. Big play artist where he had like 7 touchdowns over 50 yards. This is a player that had a lot of steam going in. Senior Bowl winners usually translate into NFL draft capital, but Jaylin Noel, unbelievable testing numbers to back this up. Even bench presses at 194 pounds, throws up 225 23 times just because. Didn't even have to bench, Cody. Like, he didn't even have to go bench. Has the most bench press reps at the wide receiver position by 4, and goes out and runs a 4.39 40. Tests well in every single other measurable. Your thoughts on Jaylin Noel, what he's done to establish his draft capital post combine with the Senior Bowl on top of it and production on the field at Iowa State?
How much you bench? That's what matters, right? That's the Amon-Ra St. Brown thing right there. So Jaylin Noel had a great combine. He had a great Senior Bowl. And I think that his momentum has only continued to push forward. I know Brett Whitefield's been kind of ahead of this. He said he's got a first-round grade on Jaylin Noel. It's only continuing to rear its head. The Christian Kirk comp is where I began with him. I think Brett's brought up the Amon-Ra St. Brown thing. Noel, when I just talked about the grades for Horn, Bech, and Burden in that Tier 1, literally the next guy who's still in the top 20 all time is Jaylin Noel. He had 23 points, which coincidentally enough, the last 2 years, last year, Ladd McConkey, 23 points. The year before that, Jackson Smith and Jigba, 23.5 points. It's still a good area to be in. All these guys have good combines that even if there's a couple of guys that don't translate in here, like you got your Jake Bobo or your Jaquan Jackson who are in this category, those are guys that had lesser profiles overall, less complete profiles. Jaylin Noel had a great combine, not only from a testing perspective, but also from an on-field perspective. He's our 4th highest graded wide receiver as far as the routes go on the field.
Yeah, and he's my wide receiver 6 overall in this class.
Ooh,
That's wide
I
receiver
like it.
6. That's where I'm at right now. I think he's really, really good. And I think his sort of he translates well for fantasy as a guy that has a bunch of outcomes to success early on. He can be parked in the slot by somebody as a rookie, but he's also a guy who can move around, and he has the strength to do so and the explosiveness, Cody, backed up by the athletic testing numbers. I think he's the kind of guy that's a really, really good target for you right now if you're drafting in best ball. This guy's going to have some big games as a rookie, and now we might get top 40 NFL draft capital after this performance. Really, really impressive. He's not the only Iowa State wide receiver who had a strong combine. Jayden Higgins, who also did some good things down in Mobile, ran very, very well at the combine. One of the taller wide receivers in this draft class, over 200 pounds, over 6'3", checks off some boxes there. Now you have some athleticism where he's not just some guy, he's going to be like a big slot kind of mismatch guy. He can play outside as well. Your thoughts on Jayden Higgins and his NFL potential post-combine?
More and more impressed by Jayden Higgins as the days go by. The size kind of starts to come into fruition as far as how big he actually was. 6'4". I think he was listed at like 6'3 3/4 at the
and a
Senior
wingspan.
Bowl.
You bring up the catch radius. The wingspan is there for Higgins as well.
Yeah, he comes in at 6'4", 214 pounds. Like, he's a bigger body guy. I think I saw the Nico Collins comp. I disagree with that one. I don't know who I saw that from on Twitter.
No.
But
That's yeah. Shout out to the person with the Nico Collins comp, but we talked about that at the time. That's not the comp.
It's a whole different play style. Like, my brain goes to Adam Thielen, who's obviously 2 inches shorter than him, but it's much more of a possession type guy like this. I think Alex said like Alan Lazard. I think Michael Pittman warrants a little bit of conversation here, but the athleticism rears through with Jayden Higgins. I mean, I did not see sub 4.5 coming. I was like, man, with Jayden Higgins, I think if I look in my database, my projection, I projected him. So I had him as a top 10 receiver in the class, and I felt low on him going into the combine. That's coming out of the Senior Bowl, which I was, day one, grew a little bit on me. I go 4.59. That's my prediction. I'll be happy with the 4.59. He cracks 4.6, right? If he gets in there, I'll be happy. He runs 4.47. Ecstatic. I didn't see it quite on tape that fast, but I'll take it. I'll take every bit of it for Jayden Higgins. So he, along with Jaylin Noel, the 2 Iowa State guys, I think they're both they're going to both end up being consensus top 10 cats in this class.
Yeah, and I think they're both going to be drafted inside the second round. It's a big shout out to the whoever is recruiting these guys for Iowa State, because really impressive to have 2 guys in the class at the same time. Let's talk about one winner at the tight end spot. Tight end a little beat up, but Terrance Ferguson, really, really strong combine.
T Ferg, baby. T Ferg. This was you want to talk about the quietest winner of the combine is kind of like where my brain goes when I think about Terrance Ferguson. I tweeted this out last night. Terrance Ferguson is in some real rare athletic air. He had 85 catches, 9 touchdowns, and over 1,000 yards over the last 2 seasons. Where he's at, 6'5", 245 pounds, similar comps to what he just put on the turf, which was sub 4.65, over a 10-foot broad, over a 38-inch vertical, at 6'5" or taller, and over 240 pounds. A lot of thresholds to hit there. 240 pounds, 6'5", 10-foot broad, sub 4.65 40. Think about that. All right. Albert Okuibunam, one of the most athletic tight ends in history. Mike Gesicki, one of the most athletic tight ends in history. Zach Kuntz, same thing, a couple years ago.
Kuntz,
Jimmy Graham. Kuntz, whatever. Theo Johnson, Jelani Woods, Bucky Hodges. Like, some of the most athletic tight ends in the history of the sport since 2003. Terrance Ferguson enters himself into that conversation. Of that group, he's the slowest. He runs a 4.63. But that's not his game. I didn't expect any of this from Terrance Ferguson. This guy had a pretty good Senior Bowl and adds on to it, the most athletic combine out of anybody in the class. So T Ferg on his way up in this class where, there's been some fallers. I think T Ferg is going to get himself up into that top 6.
I agree with you. And I think it's time sort of a flat circle here. 2 years ago, we had out of the state of Oregon from Oregon State Beavers, Luke Musgrave, super athletic tight end, gets in the second round. Now you got a duck in Terrance Ferguson, kind of a basketball frame too. Like, we talked about his frame at the Senior Bowl, where he's just like long, kind of a basketball type frame guy. Looks like a D1 forward more than necessarily an NFL player, and huge athletic numbers to sort of back up that athletic comp. So I think Ferguson, Yeah, definitely a winner, especially in context of some of the tight ends losing value. He has a chance to be a second, third round pick in the NFL draft. Let's talk about some losers. Tez Johnson, back-to-back years, Cody, they pulled the rug out on us. Troy Franklin last year supposed to be super fast, and now you got Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson, this was really shocking to me. I thought he was going to fly. Runs a 4.55. He's 0.7 of a second faster than Terrance Ferguson.
I don't want to go out and say this, but I think that there's a chance that Tez is like 5th round if he's lucky.
Yeah.
If he's lucky. Like I would, as a personal evaluator, I would put a undraftable / late flyer on him. Like it would be, we're sitting there in the 6th, 7th round. He's available. We don't have any more needs to fill. And we could use a dart throw. We haven't taken a receiver yet, but we have everything else filled in. Let's take a shot here in the 6th, 7th round. Let's take a shot. Sure. But as far as the frame, the projection of this thing happening with a guy that's 156 pounds and doesn't have the real speed, people say, well, the game speed was pretty fast. It wasn't, though. It wasn't like he didn't show that he was a 4.2 guy. He didn't show he was a 4.3 guy. You could say, oh, yeah, but he looked like he was a little quick. Sure. You could say he looked like he was a 4.4 guy, but he ran a 4.51. And he had time to test for it. And he weighs about as much as my water bottle. Like, well, no.
Yeah, it's 100. The thing with we talked about post combine, we podcasted together in Mobile, and I talked about sort of the low BMI guys that have continued to hit. But a lot of the premise of this was the low BMI guys have all been day 2 guys or day 1 guys. That the ones we cited sort of as the pro Tez Johnson model. Tank Dell was a 4.41, and that was considered sort of slow for Tank. At the 4.49 or 4.49 maybe. He was a 4.4 something to Tank Dell. Then you had obviously Tutu Atwell. He was a blazing fast guy. Those were sort of the 2 like super small wide receivers that we were trying to say Tez as an outcome to that. That ship has sailed now. He becomes a day 3 guy. He's not the kind of guy you want to take shots on in your Dynasty rookie draft unless it's a Dynasty best ball where I can worry about just getting a couple of spike weeks. Like, not a managed guy because of this profile. And we don't want to be too punitive. And again, I think speed gets overrated for a lot of these wide receivers, but not when you're 154 pounds, Cody. You've got to be able to run. So that was a disappointing one. Another disappointing one, Matthew Golden winner. And he was a full over 1/10 of a second faster than Isaiah Bond. And Isaiah Bond told everybody that he's going to, run this exceptionally fast 40. And that's sort of been a lot of the argument for the pro Isaiah Bond is Isaiah Bond is going to run the fastest 40 in the combine. He's going to end up forcing a team to take him in the 1st round. He's going to get all sorts of outcomes to help in fantasy because he'll be a 1st round pick. Now he's a 4.4 guy. With what you saw on the field last year and you saw at Alabama, when you add the context that he's a 4.4 guy, it becomes a lot less exciting.
It's wild because he told us he tested, he had a 4.23 in training. And he was so confident he was going to break the record, and then he ran 4.1. And it's super interesting because he's dealt with an ankle injury all year. He had no production really as far as comparisons to everybody else in the class. His production isn't there. He had the good game against Auburn for Alabama. He actually had a strong start to the season for Texas. He had over 100 yards against UTSA. Good game against Michigan. The interesting thing is his mile per hour run range from the combine. He hit 24.17 miles per hour, which is the fastest among all wide receivers competing at the event. Right? He didn't run the fastest 40. He ran a 4.39. That's slower than Dante Thornton, Matthew Golden, Jordan Watkins, Arian Smith, Ty Felton, Chim DK, Jalen Lane, Keandre, all these guys. He was slower on the 40-yard dash end result. But as a mile per hour threshold, he hit 24.17, which is a half mile per hour faster than the next best player, which was Dante Thornton. He's a loser for me. 100% he's a loser for me. But when you go back a year to the 40-yard dashes from the 2024 combine, which saw Xavier Worthy break the record, which saw Adnan Mitchell hit 4.35, When Adonai Mitchell hit that 4.35, he went 23.84 miles per hour, 0.3 miles per hour slower than what Bond hit. Worthy was 24.41 miles per hour. Bond, 24.17. He ran 4.28 speed. He ran a 4.28 mile per hour, 40, 4.27, whatever. You could theoretically believe that Bond in his brain wasn't actually timed in his training, but he was mile per hour trained. And they were like, man, this guy's hitting 24.3. He's hitting 4. They called that 4.23. I could theorize and I could understand where that's coming from. He does have the game speed. When you turn the tape on, you see the speed. So, and this is going to sound weird, but in the same sentence, and you guys know that I covered Texas for Orange Bloods. In the same sentence that I can tell you that Matthew Golden 4.29 to me carries no weight. I don't care. For me, I personally think it's great. I think he's an awesome kid, phenomenal player, all these things. But that 4.29 doesn't carry any weight for me because I know that's not how Golden plays. Golden isn't breaking away from guys like that. In the same sentence, I can also tell you that the 4.40 for Bond seems a little not real. I think he's faster than that. And he is like proven mile per hour wise. And if you turn the game on, he's pulling away from players. It carries weight, but it doesn't, I'm not going to kill him for it.
No,
I think it's going to create some value, but he's definitely a loser. But I think I think that the mile per hour thing is going to carry some weight for NFL teams. With that all being said, there's reports of off-field worries, question marks, board work, what's the word I'm looking for? Not human interactions. It's like human interactions with teams. They aren't the biggest fans of him.
Yeah. So listen, my thing with Bond is I don't want to kill him either on this, but I cannot have him ranked as highly with the outcome being, this was one where the draft capital was going to matter. You get more outs when you're a speed guy with draft capital than a speed guy who falls to the end of the second, early third. So, and when we look at the athletic testing numbers of both Iowa State guys, we look at the athletic testing numbers of Matthew Golden. Elick Iamaner should have probably been in the winners list. That's my L. But Iamaner runs a 4.47, and we already liked him. Like, this is one where Bond can't crack that list for me. So I think I'm going to probably have less exposure to him in Dynasty than I would have a week ago when I have that in my. And again, then we'll get into the whole topic of the 40 doesn't matter as much. It matters for certain profiles more than others. Let's talk about Devin Neal. This was definitely a disappointing one for me. Devin Neal runs a 4.58. And then when we put the weight adjusted speed score into context, I believe he is a 96, Cody. This is not so good. Sub 100 doesn't kill you, but the hit rates on sub 100 speed score guys are a lot lower than when you get over 105. Last year, of course, there's Bucky Irving was sort of the ultimate, like, don't write these guys out. Bucky was like a 90, an 89, something like that. But Devin Neal, I thought he was going to run inside the 4.4s, ends up getting the 4.58. Your thoughts on Devin Neal?
Another one that told us something and did the opposite. He told us 4.3. He ran 4.6 on the TV. It corrected to 4.58. I mean, for me right now in this class, the way this class is rolled out, I was on the rooftop yelling low, like Devin Neal at like RB12 is going to be sick value. French toast. Like, this might be RB18 in this class. It could be anywhere between 12 and 18 at this point, coming off the board, especially in the NFL draft. I think you're going to see more interest in Jarquez Hunter, Damian Martinez, obviously Tuten, Jaden Blue's going to go in day 2. I would bet money on. Donovan Edwards made himself some money. Montrell Johnson has a lot of fans out there. A lot of these guys.
ETN at a strong combine.
ETN, a lot of these guys, and we haven't even seen what Scadaboo can do, and he jumped pretty well. I don't think he's going to be fast, but the way he jumped tells us otherwise. You could see Neal just fall. Like, that's what happens in a deep class, and I think that the Bucky Irving thought is actually pretty smart.
Yeah, I mean, Devin Neal, if you like him, he's going to be a lot cheaper now, and you can get a lot more exposure to him. But the outcome, like, we thought at the Senior Bowl, Devin Neal could be a day 2 guy. That ship has sailed completely in this class. So Devin Neal falls. Definitely was disappointing to see. Tight end wise, Harold Fannin runs a 4.71, comes in at 242, But again, when we start talking about, for me, I'll take some heat for this because I've been a Harold Fannin guy for a while, and I think I'm still on Fannin as a really good route runner, slightly slower guy that I'm going to take shots on for my dynasty exposure. But Cody, Mason Taylor's going to get drafted ahead of him. Terrance Ferguson's going to get drafted ahead of him. The big three tight ends are all going to get drafted ahead of him. Now I'm talking about a guy that I'm hoping can be the sixth tight end off the board in the NFL draft. There's other guys that are right in that wheelhouse. So when Harold Fannin Jr. becomes the seventh tight end selected, the sixth tight end selected, that's not necessarily a great thing for hitting when you combine the fact that he's not that great of an athlete. So athleticism matters at the tight end spot more so than the other positions. Your thoughts on Harold Fannin Jr.?
I think Fannin's just fine. I'm not going to waste too much air on Harold Fannin. We've seen guys like JT Sanders not test well. We've seen guys like Isaiah Likely not test well as recent as a couple years ago. And I think Fannin's fine. I don't want to tank Fannin. I think the class in itself will make people lean towards, well, you got Arroyo, you got Taylor, you got Warren, you got Loveland. We'll talk about Gunnar Helm here in a second. Like, there's other guys that people like. Luke Lachey did well. But I think he's still fine. I think he's still going to be a guy that comes off the board right around pick 100, and that's going to be just fine. His play style is not to be this blocker. His play style is to be a receiver, which is what won him the Mackey Award last year. Like, this is what he is. We didn't think he was a 4-3 guy. We didn't think he was a 4-4 guy. This is just what he is. I'm content with it. I'm not going to move Fannin very far.
Yeah, and shout out to our social media director at Player Profiler, Tyler Knabel, said that this is a bet of the century that Harold Fannin ran a 4.63 or slower. So shout out to you on that one, Tyler. I hope you didn't bet too much. But Harold Fannin, like, you bring up JT Sanders and you bring up Likely. Sanders ends up going at the first pick in the fourth round. So I think that sort of alleviates a lot of fears. And there's a number of landing spots at the end of the third round where if Likely ends up in one of those spots, you're getting real excited. You need him to land on a spot where teams are just going to do set it and forget it and move tight end, find mismatches type guy, use him like sort of a Jonnu Smith type role this last year in Miami. I think that's sort of the outcome for Harold Fannin. But the idea that he could jump into the big three for the dynasty rankings because of the combine, for me, is just that ship has sailed, and I still really like him. But you bring up Isaiah Likely. I think that's sort of the pathway. Fannin way more productive as a collegiate than Likely at Coastal Carolina, but Likely was also very, very good. Let's talk about Gunnar Helm. Gunnar Helm, Cody, after the combine, we find out he had this injury on the 40. He got injured running the 40.
That's
not
gnarly
good.
video. That was a gnarly video. Did you see that?
I want to get your take on that thing, Cody, because my question to you is, like, how much, like, first of all, Gunnar Helm gets hurt and then he keeps doing drills.
Dog.
Yeah, dog, but
Idiot.
probably should have just that's not a good business decision, Cody.
It's bad business on his agent. But also, here's the thing: like, once you run that 40. Here's where my brain goes, and I'll leave it at this. There's, obviously I'm in the Texas market, and the Texas people are like, what the hell? Agent should be fired. Here's the thing. If you watch the video back, he does it. He sprains it literally on the false start. So he takes like 4 steps to slow down, rolls the hell out of it. It looks like he snaps his ankle, like he breaks it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than a sprain, but he goes back and he lines up. Like, what is he going to do? Not run? He's already in the chute. He's already lined up to go. So he just runs it, and it's horrendous, right? After you run that bad 40, you got to fix it. You got to go again. Okay, so it gets better. And then what? They're like, well, this guy sucks. He's bottom 10 percentile in athleticism. Well, then how are you going to make up for it? You're going to make up for it by running routes. Put your cleats on. Let's go run some routes. Hindsight, you probably in that moment, and you can imagine everyone's had these situations where in the moment you're like, what should I do? Should I call somebody? Should I wait a minute? He should have probably just waited a minute, been like, yo, I just rolled the hell out of my foot. I need to rethink this. And they would have been okay, cool. They probably would have been cool with him. Hindsight, I think he probably gets back in the chute and goes, I can't run. But he does it, and it just kind of unfolds the way it did, unfortunately. So now he'll have 3 weeks in like a day, 3 weeks and 2 days to get ready for his pro day. And we'll see if that thing can get healthy. We'll see if he can get that 40 under 4.7, 4.7, hopefully. And I think Helm's going to be okay. It's going to open up a lot of value, I think, for the NFL, though.
Yak King at Texas. So you got to have, if you're a Yak King, you got to run pretty well too, Cody. So definitely one there. We don't need to pile up on all the Texas guys. Big shout out to all the great work you and Alex do for Orange Bloods. Cody, what do you have coming up?
Just everything's up over at rosterwatch.com as far as the rookie write-ups, my NFL mock drafts, and then my daily show is the Draft Rankings Show. You can find that on YouTube at the Draft Rankings, and then on podcast, the Draft Rankings Show as well. Every single morning, 7 a.m. Eastern time, something about the NFL draft, whether it's a mock, whether it's rankings, whether it's player analysis, NFL draft rankings, the Draft Rankings Show every single morning, 7 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, and stick with us here at Dynasty Life, dropping multiple shows a week. Later this week, I have Alan Sislowski, along with Dave Kluge and Alfredo Brown of Football Guys. We're doing a rookie mock draft a little bit later in the week, and then we're going to be rocking even more episodes next week. We're getting you ready to crush your Dynasty rookie drafts and to crush your Dynasty leagues this season.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.